Hello, and welcome back to the Common Connected podcast. I'm your host, Janine Halloran, and on today's episode, I get a chance to speak with Kim Hopkins. She is an independently licensed clinical social worker who has been working with behaviorally challenged kids for 20 years, and she has been a collaborative and proactive solutions trainer since 2007, helping schools, residentials, hospitals, and parents successfully implement Ross Greene's collaborative and proactive solutions model. She is also the director of outreach and communication for his nonprofit Lives in the Balance. I'm excited because I wanted to share Ross Greene's work with you. I love his book Lost at School. If you've seen me speak recently, I talk about his work, but in particular, Lost at School. But as I mentioned during our interview, I love The Explosive Child. It is a book that actually helped me think differently about how to work with kids in the best way of interacting with them and helping them learn skills. So I'm so excited that we got a chance to talk. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hi, Kim. Thanks so much for coming on the Common Connected podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm so glad to be connected with you. And for people who don't know anything about you or the work of Ross Greene, can you just tell us a little bit about you and your background and what you're doing right now?
Sure. I'm a clinical social worker, and I was not always trained in this model. In fact, I was trained in the exact opposite way. Dr. Greene was too, which is why he invented the model, because he realized that the way we were trained was not helping kids the way that we had hoped when we came to our professions. I was working in residential care probably a little over 20 years ago, at the time before I became a parent. And we had a few things going on. One, we were noticing that we were restraining kids a lot. We had 12 programs and we averaged about 400 restraints a year. And kids were getting hurt, staff were getting hurt, burnout was high, right? My nose has been broken in a restraint. We were just sort of feeling like this is not as therapeutic as we're being told it is. It's not having any long-term positive impact. That was happening. We were also noticing that kids who did make gains with us, which was not every kid, often when they stepped down to a less restrictive setting, they would lose the gains that they made. So that was happening. And then this was the state of Massachusetts, who every 7 to 10 years, they ask providers to kind of recontract for services. It gives them a chance to ask us to do different cutting edge things, which is a good idea. And so we were going through that process, and the state was asking us to subscribe to what they were calling an evidence-based portable treatment model. Evidence-based meaning rooted in science, portable meaning that it didn't just work when the kid is surrounded by tons of staff in the resident program, that it could work in our day school, and it could work in our foster homes, and it could work in a community-based school, and it could work in homes that kids live in, right? And that was not the model that we were subscribing to. So we needed to make a change. And then, just serendipity, a colleague of mine shot me an email, said, hey, if you need credits for your license, you might want to go hear this guy, Dr. Ross Greene, speak. He's pretty good. And I was like, well, I actually do need some credits. And he's speaking in Freeport, Maine, which is the home of LL Bean and some really good outlet shopping. So I thought, if he's terrible, I'm out, right? I'll go shopping. But it turned out that I found the answers to everything my organization was grappling with at the time. I had no idea that was going to happen. My mind was blown in like the first 15 minutes. And that started a very long journey of making a 180-degree shift from doing like point and privilege systems and timeouts and restraint and seclusion to collaborative and proactive solutions, which was a huge shift. Before we even got good at it, we reduced restraints by 75%, and kids were making progress on their treatment plans in ways that they hadn't been before. And we saw different kids because we stopped believing that they weren't motivated, which was a really, really key shift. So then I stuck that out for a little while, and then I decided at a colleague's urging, who said, you're really good at this model. You should go see if Dr. Greene needs help. I was like, I can't do that. But I emailed him And we met, and it turned out that he had a project he could use some help on not far from where I lived. And that was about, I think come January, might even be 17 years. Yeah, a long time. And so since then, I've had the honor and privilege of teaching his model when he can't be there, and working with parents and schools and hospitals and anybody who works with kids, because it's about doing right by kids. So thanks for having me today.
Oh, I really super appreciate it. Before we started recording, I told Kim that reading Ross Greene's book, The Explosive Child, really changed how I saw children. It changed the way that I viewed the issues that we were having. I used to work in residential as well, and we used to do a lot of restraints. I've been restraint trained in a lot of different techniques and never loved it because it doesn't feel right to do that. It just doesn't. Like for all of the explanation of why and all, I appreciated the de-escalation. I always appreciate that. But the hands-on was always really hard for me. I didn't like it. And to read his book and his several books, and to think through things in such a different way makes a huge difference. And I also love Lost at School because it really does talk about CPS from in a school setting. And I love the book because it's so real. It's authentic. It's like exactly what would happen because it's never perfect. It doesn't go right the right first time because they're humans and we're human, and like it's hard. It's hard to change.
It is. It really is. The lens shift can be quite difficult depending on where you're starting from. I was starting from a way different place. So it was quite difficult.
Yes, absolutely. So, you have a lot of experience working with kids who are exhibiting concerning behaviors. Why do you think that some kids are doing this?
It's a good question. It's really the core of our model is how do we view these kids? Why do kids do things we don't like, right? And what the research tells us, and it's research that's been around for over 50 years, but has been very slow to get into mainstream way of thinking, is that kids exhibit concerning behavior because they lack the skills not to. That this is a skills deficit. It is not a motivation deficit. So we believe that kids are plenty motivated to do well because of the fact that they're human. And although we adults suffer for what they're doing, they suffer more. And so, getting out of the motivation business, right? Because if you believe kids lack motivation, if you believe kids do well if they wanna, then you're in the make them wanna business. That's the only way you can help, right? And how do we do that? Rewards, for the behaviors we like, consequences for the behaviors we don't like. And then we kind of scratch our heads and go, why doesn't this work for all kids, right? It's not a wanna issue. Kids do well if they can. That is really our core belief. And when they're not doing well, something's getting in the way. And we have 50 plus years of research to tell us what's getting in the way. Lagging skills. This is a skills deficit. And when kids lack skills, they then run into problems that they don't know how to solve. We call those unsolved problems, synonymous with unmet expectations. So this is an upstream model. And what do we mean by that? It's sort of loosely based on a fable where there's a community that lives downstream and a community that lives upstream. And the downstream community, they look over in the water because they hear people shouting for help. They appear to be drowning. So they mobilize quickly and try really hard to save everybody, and they're exhausted, right? But what they don't do is dry off and go upstream and say to the upstream community, how come people who cannot swim keep falling in the water? What's going on up here? And so this is an upstream model. When kids are in the water, that's their behavior, right? And a lot of models are focused on how often are they in the water? What do they look like in the water? Who are they targeting in the water, right? No. We go upstream, we dry off, we go upstream, and we go, what pushed them in the first place? What we find are problems that they didn't have the skills to solve. And so it's a whole different mindset of how we're going to help kids. We're going to help collaborate with them, and we're going to solve their problems with them and teach them to solve their problems. And by doing that, having these experiences, partnering with us, working on solving problems, they're going to therefore pick up the very skills they were missing in the first place, which is really, really neat without us even thinking about too hard about the lagging skills part.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is a shift to think, because you get so focused on the behavior, because the behavior can get in the way when you're in the classroom, and that makes it challenging. But what you have to do is think about, it's sort of like, I think about big picture. You've got to go big picture. Like, let's take a step back and exactly try and figure out exactly what's going on and get to the root of it, so that we can try and do something different that feels better for everybody.
Yes, it really does. Yeah, it definitely does. It's it renewed my whole sense of faith in humanity, really, about, how to work with kids, how to actually make progress. I felt so much better about my job. And then, fast forward to when I had kids, right? Knowing how I want to foster honesty with them. I don't want them to be afraid of me. I don't want them to think I can't tell her because then she's going to take something away from me, right? I want them to ask me for help, view me as a partner. We're in this together, kind of thing. And it's a completely different mindset. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. When I am having a bad day, I certainly could be off my game, right? Because it is hard. This type of parenting is hard, and completely worth it. So many benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find also, one of the things is, you start your career working with kids, but you don't have kids yet. And like, then you actually have children, and like, it also sort of flips your head around on how best to do things, because then you're like now dealing with your own like little people and understanding their like personalities and what's going on for them and there's so many layers to it. I actually feel like I've become a better therapist since I became a parent, because I get it. I get it from our parent perspective as well as a professional perspective. And it's hard. And I tell parents that all the time. Like, do you think it's easy all the time? I have a teenager, dude. Like, it's a challenge sometimes. I absolutely, I love it. I love it. I think they're delightful, but sometimes it's hard. Sometimes days and nights are hard. So it is kind of refreshing to be able to let people know that, and know like, yes, it is, this is work, but it's worth it. It's definitely it's a good situation to be in.
No doubt. Yes, no doubt. Absolutely.
So I do hear sometimes from people about like rewards and consequences, and I would love to hear why you know that rewards and consequences don't work for some kids.
Well, experience, right? Is one way. Like, I'll say to a school, like, how many detentions before you decide it's not getting the job done, right? Or to parents, how many times you're going to take the video games away,
Yep.
but you still have the same problem over and over, right? And that's because rewards and consequences don't teach skills. And skills are the heart of this thing, right? All rewards and consequences do is give feedback that what you did, we either did or did not like, which they actually knew before they did it, even little ones, right? Can remember my son being 18 months old and we're in the library. I remember it as if it was yesterday, and he's now 7, right? And he didn't long story short, he was playing with trains and he put some down to like go build a piece for them, and his sister didn't realize he was not done with those, and of course of the 30 trains she wanted one of those, so she picked it up and he winged a train across the library and then threw himself on the floor in a whole tantrum. Even at 18 months he knew that was not okay because I had told him. Right. So if I consequence him, I'm just reminding him that I did not like that very much. Right. And instead, what I needed to do was figure out how to help him with whatever skills were behind that. And I don't even necessarily need to know what lagging skills drove that. I just want to focus on the unsolved problem. You have difficulty sharing the trains with your sister. That was the problem we figured out. Right. So we can give kids feedback about what we like and don't like by setting our expectations. Then, which expectations are very important, right? We like the realistic variety, of course. When your child has difficulty meeting that expectation, then it's time for problem solving. It's not time for a consequence because we believe it wasn't intentional. They didn't wake up in the morning thinking at 2:37 today, when I get off the bus, I'm going to throw my backpack and scream like a banshee, right? And they know it's not okay, and it happens anyway. It's time to get curious. What was the problem that the kid didn't know how to solve? And we become their problem-solving partners. The more and more we do that with them, the more they start to actually gain the very skills that they were missing in the first place. Skills like frustration tolerance, problem solving, flexibility, adaptability, and a whole host of social skills, all that the research tells us kids who exhibit concerning behavior in the face of frustration lack. So for us, there's rewards and consequences don't really get it done. We're not 100% allergic to rewards, but we would only reward kids for things we can know they can do.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Because it is one of those things, like the kids who respond well to rewards and consequences, they actually they're good. Like they get it. They understand, and they have the skills.
Yeah, it's the thing. They have the skills to respond, right?
Right.
It's interesting because my daughter has the skills to respond to that method, right? We call it Plan A. If you're using Plan A when an expectation isn't met, you're doing something along the lines of rewards and consequences. The thing is, though, there's a cost to that, even if she can adjust to it, because the relationship takes a hit.
Yes.
That distancing, because I now see you as standing between me and everything I like to do, right? So I'm going to go around and go underground, right? So just because she can adjust to it doesn't mean I should do it. Because, and then I'm teaching nothing either when I use Plan A. I'm not teaching any skills. So it's good that she can adjust to Plan A, and yet I find I have to say, well, just because I know she's going to swallow this doesn't mean I should do it. I want to stay in relationship with her, and I want to teach her what she might need to know.
Right. And it's all about the connection, because you can lose the connection very easily when it becomes really focused on rewards and consequences as a parent. And the whole point is you don't want them to go underground. You don't want them to hide things from you. You want them to stay in communication with you. As a parent of a teenager, I want the conversation to continue. And I know that's really challenging, but I think, laying the groundwork when they were early of saying, we're going to have talks. We're going to figure this out. We're going to problem solve this together. We're going to figure this out. And to continue to have that conversation as they've gotten older, I think it really has made a world of difference in the fact that they now will tell me when something is going on, when something makes them uncomfortable, when something is happening that is a little bit off. So I want that connection. I want that communication.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no doubt. I know, as you have a 14-year-old, I have a 12-year-old, and it's just starting to get scary.
I actually, teenagers are actually my favorite. I know that people are like, ooh, I'm like, I do. I really love teenagers. Anyway.
That's awesome.
It's really weird. I do. I like the conversations that you can have. They get really deep, right? But then they can also be still kind of young or innocent, and it's interesting. I find it so fascinating to see which teenager will pop up in the moment. Are you still talking about things that you used to love you playing with as a kid? Or are we talking about what job you're going to have? It's fascinating to me.
That's a great way to put it. It absolutely is, because yes, it is who is going to show up now?
Right, exactly. And same child, different, oh gosh, hour. It just depends on the day. That's how their brains are growing and changing, and I'm here for it. Let's do it. So for people who aren't necessarily familiar with collaborative and proactive solutions, can you just give us a brief overview? I know it's a huge way of shift of thinking, but could you give people a little bit of an overview of what that means when you're actually
Sure.
parenting or teaching?
Yeah, it means a few things. We're not focused on behavior. That's not the important observable data. All behavior, whether it's super dangerous or it's just crying and sulking, tells us the same thing. It's a signal that the kid ran into a problem that they didn't know how to solve. So behavior can lead us down some roads that are unhelpful. So we don't focus on it. We focus on the problems upstream. We work collaboratively with kids, even little ones. We see them as our partners in this problem solving process. So it's something that we do with kids, not to them. This is very much, again, as the title would suggest, a proactive model where you can use it in the heat of the moment when your kid is freaking out right in front of you, but nothing good happens in the heat of the moment. We kind of want to get you out of the heat of the moment. How do we do that? We work proactively outside of the heat of the moment. And there's a few things that we do to try to prevent the heat of the moment while we're getting problem solving going. We believe, again, kids do well if they can, and that doing well is always preferable. And so those are the lenses we sort of approach things with. Then it all starts with our assessment of lagging skills and unsolved problems, which might sound scary, but is not. It's a single-sided, single sheet of paper that helps you understand your child in terms of their why. Why do they exhibit concerning behavior in the face of frustration? The answer to that is lagging skills. So we're first going to just sort of take a good guess on what skills they might be lacking. And then it's going to help figure out their when. When does this play out? When does this happen? When do these unsolved problems pop up? When do I have an expectation that my child is likely not going to meet? And that's what we're going to note underneath. And we have some ways of helping you do that. But it all starts there, because typically the parents who are seeking out our model don't have kids that have 5 unsolved problems. They have kids that have piles of unsolved problems. So we really do want to do a nice, thorough job of having a complete understanding of everything they struggle with, because now it's our roadmap. So we're making the kid predictable to get proactive, but we're also taking a look at this and going, I cannot solve 55 unsolved problems at once. I don't know how to do that. I don't think it's possible. So I'm going to pick my high priorities. 1 high priority when I'm practicing the model, 2 or 3 when we're both good at it, right? But even then, that's it at once to problem solve with the kids. For the rest, I'm going to need to do something different. And so not the model, but something we like is what we call Plan C. So Plan A is the reward consequence. When we're the adults in charge, and we're just going to solve the problem unilaterally. Plan C is when you set the problem aside temporarily. You're not giving in. Giving in is when you start with Plan A, it blows up in your face because Plan A often makes things worse. Then you go, never mind. That's giving in. Going with Plan C, you've done an LSIP, you've picked your high priorities you're going to work on. For everything else, figure out some workarounds to prioritize, stabilize, and make room to work on your high priorities. It's just temporary because we're not teaching anything. We're not teaching any skills with Plan C, but the relationship stays intact. We're not making anything worse, right? Then get to work on your high priority unsolved problems. CPS is also known as Plan B. That's when you're going to collaborate with your partner to come to a mutually satisfactory solution. There's 3 steps to the model, and the order is critical, but happening in one sit down does not matter as long as there's follow-up later, right? And we have lots of resources on our website. I haven't mentioned that yet, livesinthebalance.org. The entire model is free on the website. So there's, for example, a Plan B cheat sheet on there, which outlines all 3 steps of the model that you walk through with the child, and gives you some language for each ingredient of each step. And that's going to help you come to a resolution that is both feasible and mutually satisfactory. Essentially, real quick, the first step's the empathy step, where we first try to understand from the kid what's getting in the way of being able to meet the expectation or solve the problem. We can observe their behavior and their feelings, but we don't know their thinking. And if we could know that, we could actually design a solution that has a good shot of working. So we work hard in step 1. It takes time because your child is not going to just say, well, here's what's happening, right? So you're going to have to work for it, but we have some strategies for that called drilling. Once you understand where the kid's coming from, then in step 2, you say what worries you. when this problem is unsolved. It's a pretty quick step. It's a sentence or so. And then step 3 is the invitation step, where we invite your child to consider where they're coming from and where you're coming from, and to design a solution that addresses both and is also feasible. They get first crack at it, but if they have trouble coming up with something, you are the partner and you can make a suggestion and get their feedback on it. Then you try it out and you see what happens. Sometimes first solutions don't work. Sometimes they do, and you get lucky. But if they don't work, it's this partnership. We come back, we learn from it, we make a tweak, we try something else. And that's sort of the cadence. And then once you get a solution working, everybody celebrates because it feels good. We have this big unsolved problem that now is solved because your child has a way of handling it.
Yep. What I love about this model is that there is equality in problem solving. So it's not an adult telling a child what to do. It is, we are both working on this together. It's like you're sort of trying to defeat the problem together, trying to figure it out. And it's such a great life skill just in general. Like, how do you work through problems in general? How do you work through problems with a partner as you're growing up and getting into relationships? Like, it's just really helpful, practical ways that you can really be thoughtful and careful, and just taking the time to actually teach them that strategy, teach them that skill of how do you problem solve when there's a problem? Like, how do you fix it? How do you make it better? And allowing them to understand, like, they have skin in the game. So your ideas matter.
Yes, absolutely. I loved what you said about equality, because we talk about that a lot. Because with Plan A, we're not even trying to understand the kid's perspective, but with Plan B, not only are we trying to understand it, it's given equal weight to our own, which feels scary for adults, but you're still the adult. No one is taking your power. We're just asking you to use it differently, because kids have valid concerns, even if you don't quite agree with them. They don't have to agree with yours either. You're just trying to come to a resolution that meets both. And when you work to meet a kid's perspective, they're going to work to meet yours. And nice things happen from there. Absolutely. And you're right. A lot of people say, well, what good is this if I'm doing this in my home, but they're not doing it at school, or my kid's older and they're not doing it at work, or they run into the police or something like that, right? They're going to take these skills with them.
Right.
So while I would love it if their school and other adults in their lives were doing this model, would make progress faster, no doubt. And yet these are skills they're going to take with them, right? If they don't have the skills to handle Plan A, because it takes frustration tolerance, flexibility, adaptability, problem solving, right? Then let's skill them up so that if they get Plan A somewhere else, they can handle it and they're not landing in the water over it, which will make things worse.
Yes, absolutely. And, one of the things that I will run into when I mention this model is that, when I'm speaking to professionals, they're like, well, this is going to take a lot of time, a lot of time, especially in the school setting. So I always have an answer, but I'd love to hear what your answer is to that.
Sure. Yeah. We work with lots and lots and lots of schools all the time. I think at last count right now in this moment, we're providing individual ongoing training to 100 schools right now. Yeah. And so is it easy? No, but it also depends on where you're starting from. If you're starting from 180-degree arc like I was, it's going to take a little time, right? But, we say start small and start with a core group that's kind of representative of different grade levels, different positions, right? 8 to 10 people. Maybe do a book study or watch the free videos online, right? And discuss them and figure it out, right? And start to think through, what would we have to shift? What we would have to shift in terms of our processes and procedures and paperwork, right? And it's starting small. I wouldn't get rid of the current system without being good at this first. And once people are good at this and seeing successes, they're going to say, why would we keep a kid out from recess? Why would we give detention? Right. And it sort of becomes this natural thing that we get rid of. But start small, use all the free resources on the website. Be in touch if you want help. Some schools, like the ones I mentioned, decided that they wanted some help leading the charge. You don't necessarily need that, but some would like that. So we offer some different things to help people, to help them out. And then we see amazing stuff like reduction in office referrals, getting rid of detention, getting rid of suspension, getting rid of expulsion, and of course, reductions in restraint and seclusion, which happens in many schools, um, today. Not to mention paddling, which does happen in 19 states across the US. I like to make sure people know that, because a lot of people, if you don't live in a state that uses paddling, you often don't know it's happening. And it is happening about 200,000 times a year. So if you are as upset about that as we are, then you can also go on our website and check out all of our advocacy efforts and get involved. There are small ways to get involved and there's big ways to get involved, because we're trying to get rid of dangerous punitive practices for kids.
Absolutely. And the reason I love that you're doing this is because it's so unhealthy. It's such an unhealthy way of trying to teach somebody a strategy or teaching them that they shouldn't do something. It's like it's not helpful. And so I'm loving that you are advocating to get rid of that. It is alarming. Having lived in Massachusetts and taught in Massachusetts, that's not a thing here, but we don't live in a state that happens. And so it is shocking when you hear how many states still have that as an option.
Yeah. Yeah. Unbelievable, really. Like, I was like, what are you talking about? Because I've lived in a couple different states. None of them were states that used paddling. So when I heard that, I was like, what? And it's not just on the books, it's actually happening.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There was an article a couple years back before the pandemic, and in a newspaper in a southern state that does paddling, and they had a picture of the paddle with kids' names written on it.
Mm-mm.
Like, it's barbaric, is what it is.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful. And so I want to make sure that people get directed to your site to understand that there's a different way to do it. You don't have to do it this way. You can think through things in a different way. You can start small, you can do something. So livesinthebalance.org, and I'll link to that in the show notes. And I love that everything that we've talked about is online and available for families. So, and available for schools. So if you want to start something, you want to understand, and I've seen the one page thing, it's like phenomenal in terms of just trying to help you get a grasp of what is the problem and trying to figure out where to go. It gives you a roadmap. It really is phenomenal. Like it's a beautiful way of, trying to get your brain focused, especially when we as the adults get overwhelmed when we are dealing with kids who are showing behaviors like this. It gets frustrating. It is exhausting. It is hard. It's hard work. And so instead of reacting, we need to be proactive. So what are the things that we can do? So it's a great roadmap. I'd recommend it for people. So I will link to that in the show notes. And I appreciate all the advocacy that you are doing, and, having Dr. Ross Green's books available and having book studies. It's a great idea. I love it. I want to thank you so much for taking the opportunity and the time to come on. And so I always end with one question. What are your own coping skills? What do you do to rest and recharge and re-energize yourself?
Well, my main way of coping is currently not available to me, which I am an avid tennis player, but I have an injury and I will not be able to play for quite a while. My injury occurred playing tennis because I believe there's only one way to play, and that's go hard and pretend I'm 20 when I'm not. But I love to read, love to play with my kids, love to bake, especially this time of year, that kind of stuff. I also can't go for walks right now, but I do enjoy walking and hope to get back to that pretty soon. But just getting some fresh air and moving, all is a great way for me to recharge.
Oh, that's wonderful. I actually just recorded a podcast that will be coming out in a couple of weeks all about movement. And I actually mentioned, I'm pretty sure I mentioned tennis and just walking and moving in nature, because it's one of those things that is really restful. Like it gives us energy. It rests our brain. It renews our brain. It's wonderful. So you sound like a mover.
Well, it's funny. I wasn't for a long time, and then about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I made a huge shift, and I can feel my mental health has lifted because of it. And so, not being able to move the way I want to move is not fun. But I actually just this morning I found a chair sitting aerobics instruction video on YouTube, and I like it actually got my heart rate up. I loved it. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. That's
Yeah.
what you have to do. You have to find those chair workout videos. There's actually a bunch of them. I know,
Yeah.
sometimes you go down these like rabbit holes of things and you're like, huh, that's a thing. I didn't know. So there,
Yeah, I'm gonna start looking into more and more. I was doing a little bit of like weights and stuff, but I like watching a video and following along. I don't know
yeah.
why. Just I like it to be mindless.
Yeah, that's okay. Then you don't have to think about it. You can just follow what the instructor says and do it. And then, before you know it, the time is up.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I like that.
Thank you so much for coming on the Calm and Connected podcast. As always, everybody, take a few minutes, have a little fun, and have an awesome day.